The first-class cabin was quiet, but it wasn't peace I felt when I stepped inside. Silence has a weight, and I could feel it pressing on my shoulders the moment I entered. Eyes followed me, some curious, some resentful, some already decided. I didn't belong. Figures, a man behind me muttered, not even lowering his voice. They'll let anyone in here these days. My hand tightened around the boarding pass. I didn't turn. I'd learned too many times that looking back only gave them what they wanted. Confirmation that their words landed. I slid toward my row, but then I saw her, an elderly woman with a small frame, shoulders hunched, trying to lift her bag into the overhead. Her hands shook with the effort. The flight attendant leaned down and whispered, just loud enough for me to hear, "Ma'am, you're holding up the line." Her eyes flicked to mine, quick, apologetic, almost guilty, as if she expected I'd be the next person to sigh at her, maybe shove past, maybe tell her she didn't belong. I stood still for a second. My stomach twisted, because I knew that look, the one that says, "I've been told all my life I'm a burden. I know you'll see me the same way." I stepped forward. "Ma'am, take my seat, I'll move." She froze. "Oh, I couldn't do that." "You can," I said softly. Her lips trembled. "People like you don't usually give up seats." I almost laughed at the bitter truth in her words. "People like me? We've been giving things up for centuries." The air shifted. Passengers leaned closer, whispers spreading like static. A businessman in the next row chuckled. "Guess money doesn't buy class after all." My chest burned, but I didn't bite. The flight attendant frowned at me. "Sir, you don't have to." "I want to," I cut in. My voice was calm, but inside I was tired. So damn tired of always being measured, always being doubted. The woman lowered herself into my seat carefully. She looked up at me as though she didn't know whether to thank me or apologize again. "I don't know why you did that," she whispered. "But thank you." I shrugged, though the truth weighed heavy on me. "Because I know what it feels like when people look right through you." Her eyes softened, the corners glistening. "You've carried that a long time, haven't you?" "Long enough," I said. For a while we sat in silence, but it wasn't empty. She kept studying me, not with suspicion, not with pity. Something sharper, something knowing. And the longer her gaze held mine, the more it felt like she saw through layers I'd buried deep, to places even I didn't want to touch. By the time the seatbelt sign dinged, I realized it wasn't just a seat I'd given away, it was a piece of myself. And from the way she looked at me, I knew she understood more than she let on. I slid into an empty seat near the front, feeling the sting of whispers trail behind me. I'd given up my place without regret. But the room hadn't forgotten. "CEO? Him?" The businessman's voice cut through the hum of the cabin. "Doubt he even owns his suit." A nervous chuckle rose from someone across the aisle. I could feel their smirks against the back of my neck. I turned slightly, leaning forward. My voice was calm, but it carried weight. "You want to say that to my face?" He didn't hesitate. His eyes met mine, brimming with arrogance. "Don't play the victim card. We're all tired of it." The words hit like a slap, but not because they were new, because they were so damn familiar. I'd heard them in boardrooms, in interviews, even whispered at country clubs when people thought I couldn't hear. Before I could answer, a softer voice slipped in. "You should be ashamed." It was the elderly woman, her tone steady, her eyes locked on him. He scoffed. "Ashamed? For what? Speaking the truth?" She didn't flinch. "Truth?" Her voice cut like glass. "What truth? That you can't stand to see a black man sit where you think you belong?" Gasps fluttered across the cabin. The businessman shifted in his seat, but he forced a grin. "Here we go again. Everything's about race with you people." I exhaled slowly, steadying myself. "Everything?" My voice dropped, low and even. Tell me, what part of my suit was about race? What part of my success was about race? Because the only thing you've brought up since I walked on this plane was race. He rolled his eyes. You're twisting words. I didn't mean it like that. Yes, you did, I said sharply. You meant it exactly like that. That's the problem. The tension thickened. The passengers who'd laughed earlier stared at their laps, suddenly mute. Silence had a way of showing guilt. The elderly woman's gaze lingered on me, deeper this time, as if she were seeing not just the man on this plane, but every battle I'd ever fought. You've carried this weight a long time, haven't you? She whispered. I swallowed hard. My chest felt heavy because she wasn't asking. She was naming something I tried to hide behind my calm voice and pressed suit. Yes, I admitted, my voice rougher than I intended. A long time. The businessman shifted again, muttering something under his breath, but the words didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that, for the first time in a long time, someone else had spoken my truth out loud. And I couldn't shake the feeling that this woman, this stranger in my seat, wasn't done seeing me yet. The hum of the engines settled into a rhythm, steady enough to press against the silence between us. She adjusted her seatbelt, her frail fingers brushing against mine as if by accident. So, she said softly, turning her head toward me. What's your story? I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. My story? Yes, she said, eyes steady. Everyone has one. And yours, it feels like it hasn't been easy. I gave a dry laugh, low enough that it sounded more like a cough. Easy isn't a word I've heard attached to me very often. She tilted her head, waiting. I swallowed. I grew up hearing, you'll never make it. Over and over, teachers, neighbors, sometimes even family. Like it was a mantra they needed me to believe. I carried it like a second skin. Her gaze didn't flinch. When I finally clawed my way into boardrooms, I continued, I'd walk in and see nothing but faces that didn't look like mine. I'd sit at those long tables, surrounded by men in suits, their eyes cutting me down before I even opened my mouth. And you learn fast. I hesitated, forcing the words out. Sometimes silence is safer than confrontation. Even when silence feels like swallowing fire. She nodded slowly. And yet you kept walking into those rooms, because not walking in meant they won. But don't mistake that for bravery. Most days, it felt like survival. Her hand tightened over the armrest. Survival is no small thing. I studied her, trying to read the lines on her face. They weren't pitying. They weren't apologetic. They were heavy, like someone carrying her own weight of silence. She drew in a sharp breath. May I tell you something? I nodded. Her voice dropped almost a whisper. When I was a young woman, my family had a maid. She was black. She raised me more than my own mother ever did, braided my hair, sang me songs when I was sick. One evening, she sat at our kitchen table. Just for a moment. She was tired. She dared to rest where we ate. Her throat caught. My father walked in, she continued, voice trembling, and he fired her, on the spot, for sitting at a table. I clenched my fists, heat rising in my chest. I said nothing, she whispered. I sat there, and I watched her walk out the door, tears on her face. She never came back. Her voice cracked now, brittle with years of unspoken memory. Do you know what it does to a person to stay silent when they should have spoken? I swallowed hard. My voice came out harsher than I intended. Why, are you telling me this now? Her eyes locked onto mine, wet but unyielding. Because silence has a cost. And I paid it. Every day since, I won't pay it anymore. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The hum of the plane filled the space, but it wasn't enough to drown out the pounding in my chest. She reached for her glass of water, her hand trembling. People think time forgives. It doesn't. It only reminds. I leaned back, staring at her. She wasn't confessing for pity. She wasn't searching for absolution. She was cutting herself open, laying the truth bare between us. And in that raw honesty, I felt it. A shift. She wasn't just an elderly woman sharing a memory. She was something more, something I couldn't yet name. But I knew one thing for certain. Silence wasn't going to define either of us anymore. His laugh split through the cabin. "Figures!" the businessman barked, voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "You probably only got your company through quotas, diversity hires, handouts. That's the only way people like you ever end. Up in charge." The words hit like stones against my chest. My jaw tightened and my fingers curled around the armrest. Every instinct screamed at me to stand, to fire back, to show him exactly who I was and how wrong he was. I rose halfway from my seat, breath sharp in my lungs. That's when I felt it. A soft, fragile hand pressed gently against my arm. Not. "Every fight needs fire," the elderly woman whispered, her voice steady as stone. "Sometimes quiet words burn more." Her touch froze me in place. My heart thudded, not from rage now, but from the strange weight of her calm. She didn't flinch. She didn't raise her voice. She just sat there, wrinkled hand resting lightly on mine, as if anchoring me against the storm. I looked at her, searching her face for something. An answer, maybe, or permission to let go, of the anger boiling in me. She simply nodded toward the businessman. She turned, fixing her gaze on him. "Do you know who you're speaking to?" The man scoffed, leaning back in his seat, arms folded like a spoiled child. "Yeah, some token. With a title, that's all," I wanted to shout, to tear his words apart. To tell him exactly how hard I'd fought, how many nights I'd clawed my way through walls built to keep people like me out. But before I could even inhale, the woman stopped me with the smallest shake of her head. She didn't argue with him. She didn't raise her chin or spit venom back. She just smiled. That silence stretched, thick and heavy. And suddenly, the businessman's smirk faltered. He looked around the cabin, waiting for someone to laugh with him. Nobody did. The flight attendant shifted uncomfortably by the aisle. A passenger 2 rows up cleared his throat. Still, the woman stayed quiet. Still, she looked at him with eyes that didn't blink. And me? I sat back down. My pulse still pounded, but something inside me shifted. For once, I didn't explode. For once, I let silence be the weapon. The man muttered under his breath, but it carried no power anymore. His words dropped like stones into water, vanishing without a ripple. The elderly woman gave my arm one last reassuring squeeze, then folded her hands neatly in her lap. Her silence said more than any speech I could have given. And as I leaned back into my seat, breath slowing, I realized she had given me a gift I'd never trusted before, the strength to let quiet win. The cabin jolted one last time, then steadied. The seatbelt sign dimmed. My chest unclenched, but the air around me still buzzed, thick with the aftertaste of insult and unspoken judgment. The elderly woman leaned closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "May I borrow your strength for a moment?" I frowned. My strength? She gave me a look that made my protests shrivel. Then she pressed the flight attendant call button. The attendant approached, rehearsed smile fixed in place. "Yes, ma'am. I'd like to use your intercom," the woman said evenly. The attendant's smile faltered. "That's not allowed." "Not usually," she replied, slipping a hand into her bag. "But today is not usual." She pulled out a badge. Gold letters. Official seal. I caught only a glimpse, but the flight attendant's eyes widened, and suddenly her posture shifted. "Oh, I see. One moment, ma'am." My heart hammered. I whispered, "What are you doing?" Her lips curved in the smallest smile. Ending the silence. The attendant returned, nervous, and handed her the intercom. A soft crackle filled the cabin. Every conversation hushed. The woman's voice carried through the speakers. Calm, deliberate, impossible to ignore. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't usually introduce myself this way, but today feels different. My name is Evelyn Carter. I am the owner of this airline. Gasps rippled like a wave. Heads turned. Eyes widened. From behind me, the businessman's voice stumbled out, jagged and disbelieving. You own this airline? Yes. Evelyn's answer was steady, unhurried. And I've been listening, closely. Her gaze cut toward me, then swept across the cabin. This man, she pointed directly at me, and my throat tightened. Gave me his seat when no one else would. He showed dignity, respect, and strength, qualities many of you lack. The businessman shifted in his chair. That's not fair, She lifted a hand, silencing him without a word. Her voice sharpened just enough to pierce. What isn't fair is mocking a man for the color of his skin. What isn't fair is assuming his worth before hearing his story. What isn't fair is the ease with which cruelty passes for casual conversation. Murmurs broke out. Passengers exchanged uneasy glances, guilt flickering across faces that had moments ago been amused spectators. I sat frozen, my palms damp, my pulse rushing in my ears. Evelyn lowered the intercom, her voice now for me alone. You gave me more than a seat today, she said softly, eyes locked on mine. You gave me faith that compassion still lives where hate has long tried to bury it. I swallowed hard, my throat raw. Words deserted me. For once, I didn't need them. Around us, silence deepened. Not the silence of indifference, but the silence of shame. And for the first time that flight, I didn't feel small. His hands trembled as he reached out, his voice cracking. I didn't mean it. You have to believe me. It was just a joke. Please, don't report me. The same mouth that once spat venom now begged like a child afraid of shadows. My chest tightened, but not out of pity, out of memory. I remembered every laugh at my expense, every time men like him turned pain into their punchline. Evelyn stepped forward, her tone sharp enough to slice the silence. Racism isn't a joke, she said, her eyes locked on his. It's a disease, and you've been spreading it without care. The crowd pressed closer. Phones hovered in the air. He knew the world was watching now, and the mask he had worn of power, superiority, untouchable arrogance was crumbling piece by piece. He looked at me suddenly, his eyes wide, desperate. You, he whispered. Help me. Say something for me. Please. For a moment, I only stared. My mind flashed with images of his smirk when he dismissed me, his sneer when he thought I was nothing but a nuisance. I remembered the sting of invisibility he forced on me, the way he looked through me as if I were dust under his polished shoes. My lips parted, and I let the words come slow, deliberate. Why? I asked. Why should I? When you never even saw me as human. He flinched. The weight of the words hit harder than any fist could. His gaze dropped, his shoulders folding inward as if trying to make himself small. Please, he stammered, sweat streaking down his temple. I didn't mean harm, I was just what? Evelyn cut in, her voice steady. Just mocking a man's skin? Just belittling someone's dignity? Just stripping away humanity for your amusement? Tell me, how many people have you laughed at when no one was watching? He couldn't answer. His lips moved, but no sound came out. The crowd filled the silence with whispers, some disgusted, some satisfied, all witnesses to the fall of his mask. I leaned closer, my voice low so only he could hear. This moment, this fear you feel right now, it's a fragment of what you made me live every single day. You feared being judged for one mistake. I lived judged for simply existing. His eyes brimmed with something, shame maybe, Or just the terror of losing status? He swallowed hard, his breath shallow. I can change, he muttered weakly. I'll do better. Just don't let this ruin me. I almost laughed, but it wasn't amusement. It was disbelief. You're afraid of ruin, I said softly. I was afraid of erasure. Every day. Afraid my voice would vanish before it was heard. That's the difference between us. You fear what people think of you. I feared if people would ever see me at all. He dropped his head into his hands. The crowd shifted, some shaking their heads, some recording his downfall. Evelyn stood firm beside me, her silence now louder than any words. For the first time, I felt no anger, only clarity. I didn't need vengeance. The truth had already stripped him bare. I turned slightly so the onlookers could hear, my voice calm, steady. Humiliation isn't what I want for him. Accountability is. Remember this moment. Remember how quickly pride collapses when truth stands against it. A hush fell. He didn't move, didn't speak, just sat in the wreckage of his own undoing. And me? For the first time, I didn't feel small. I felt whole. The power wasn't in crushing him. It was in standing tall while he could no longer hide. The mask was broken, and there was no putting it back on. The cabin had gone still. Every set of eyes pressed against the back of the man's neck, waiting. Evelyn's voice cut through the silence like a blade. Evelyn, you will apologize, not just to him. She nodded toward me, her tone unwavering, but to everyone here. Loud enough so they all hear what you've done. He shifted in his seat, his jaw tightening. Businessman. This is unnecessary. I already said, Evelyn. No, she snapped, her voice ringing with finality. You mumbled excuses. You haven't faced what you did. Say the words. He looked around, but no one came to his defense. Not a single passenger spoke. Even the flight attendant stood frozen, clutching the service tray, eyes locked on him. Businessman. This has gone far enough. I leaned forward, my voice low, trembling but sharp. Me. Far enough? You dragged me through hell for sitting in a seat. You called me out like a criminal in front of strangers. And now you think you get to decide what's enough? He flinched, his knuckles white on the armrest. My chest burned, years of swallowed words clawing their way up. Me. Do you know what it's like to live in a world that calls you less every single day? To walk into a room and feel guilty before you even open your mouth? That's my life. That's what I carry. And all you saw, my throat caught, but I forced it out, was a seat. Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. Passengers shifted. Uncomfortably, but no one looked away. Evelyn's eyes found mine, soft but fierce. She gave me the slightest nod, as though she had been waiting for me to say the thing I'd never dared voice aloud. The man swallowed, his voice barely more than a rasp. Businessman, I apologize. The words fell flat, almost lost in the hum of the engines. Evelyn didn't move. Neither did I. The silence demanded more. He glanced around, realizing there was no escape. His shoulders sagged, and he spoke louder this time, though his voice shook. Businessman, I apologize to you, to everyone here, for what I said, for how I acted. The flight attendant's eyes glistened. A woman across the aisle covered her mouth. No one clapped, no one cheered, just silence, heavier than any noise could be. Inside, I was shaking. Not from fear this time, but from the release of chains I hadn't even realized I still wore. My heart thudded, raw and exposed, but steady. Evelyn leaned close, her whisper threading through the still air. Evelyn, that's your voice. Never let them take it again. Her words settled into me like fire, and for the first time in years I believed her. The wheels touched down with a heavy thud, and the entire cabin shifted forward as the brakes roared. My chest tightened. For hours I had been holding my breath, carrying the weight of every whisper, every glance. Now the silence felt sharper than the engine's scream. Evelyn leaned closer, her voice soft, calm, deliberate. "Walk out with me," she whispered. I hesitated, my palms pressed into my knees. "With you?" Everyone's staring already. She didn't flinch. "Exactly." The seatbelt light blinked off and the usual scramble began. Passengers rose, snatching bags, crowding the aisle. But something shifted. A path opened. People stepped aside, eyes darting from me to Evelyn, then back again. Some looked ashamed, others curious. The businessman who had mocked me earlier shrank back, pale as paper. He didn't move, didn't speak. For once, silence was his answer. Stood slowly. My knees trembled, but Evelyn's steady hand on my arm anchored me. We walked together down the narrow aisle, the murmurs rising like waves behind us. At the door, Evelyn bent slightly toward me, her lips barely moving. "You will always have a seat at my table," she whispered. The words hit me harder than any insult thrown my way. My throat tightened. I wanted to reply, but nothing came out. The door opened, and the rush of outside air carried noise with it. The clicking of cameras, the hum of voices. Reporters stood waiting at the gate, their lenses pointed directly at us. My stomach dropped. This wasn't chance. Evelyn had orchestrated this. She stepped forward first, her posture regal, her tone sharp and unwavering as microphones shoved in her face. "Today," she said, "we witnessed something that should shame us all. A woman, dignified, calm, respectful, was treated with cruelty because of the color of her skin. This behavior has no place in our world." The crowd buzzed. Questions flew. Cameras flashed. She continued, her hand briefly brushing mine before she let it fall. What struck me most was her dignity. She carried herself not in anger, but in strength. "That is leadership, and it deserves respect." The words sliced through the noise. I could barely process it. My name wasn't spoken, but everyone knew who she meant. I felt every eye on me, but for the first time, I wasn't shrinking. When the reporters pressed closer, Evelyn leaned back toward me, her voice lowering so only I could hear. "You carried yourself like a leader today," she said. "Not because of what you own, because of who you are." I swallowed hard. Why did you choose to reveal yourself like this? You could have stayed silent. She looked at me with eyes that held both fire and sorrow. "Because the world needed to hear you. Not me. You." The words buried themselves deep inside me, heavier than any title, sharper than any wound. I didn't feel triumphant as I walked forward, away from the flashing cameras, the murmurs, the shame in their faces. I felt steady, changed. Evelyn's words echoed with every step, not because of what I own, because of who I am, and for the first time in a long while, I believed it.